When China said no, India didn't just rethink its strategy. It rewrote the entire playbook. After over a decade of planning, a decade of delays, and a decade of diplomatic discussion, India's most ambitious high-speed rail project, the Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train, stands at the crossroads of history. Once envisioned as a joint marvel between Asia's titans, China and India, the project now finds itself riding on the shoulders of an experimental train, Japan's not-yet-tested E10 series Shinkansen. It's a story that sounds more like a techno-political thriller than a simple infrastructure plan, one of rejected deals, political gambits, and futuristic trains that don't yet exist, all set against the backdrop of a global power realignment. So how did India get here? Why did China walk away from a $100 billion offer? And can an untested prototype from Japan deliver what even seasoned partners have failed to build in 10 years? Let's break it all down. The story of India's high-speed rail ambitions isn't just about trains. It's about national identity, economic ambition, and the age-old struggle of turning grand visions into physical reality. It all began in 2012 when the Indian government unveiled the Diamond Quadrilateral Plan, a bold blueprint for a high-speed railway network connecting the country's 4 major metros: Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, and Chennai. Modeled after Japan's legendary Shinkansen and inspired by China's rapidly expanding bullet train empire, this plan promised a leap forward in connectivity, potentially transforming both the flow of commerce and the rhythm of daily life across India. At the center of this plan was the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor, a 508-kilometer line envisioned as the country's flagship bullet train project. Designed to connect 2 major economic hubs, the corridor promised to cut travel time from 6 hours to just 2. This route, if successfully completed, would mark India's entry into the elite league of nations with high-speed rail infrastructure and serve as a test case for future corridors across the subcontinent. In 2015, Japan stepped in with a proposal that seemed almost too good to be true. Unlike the convoluted terms often seen in international infrastructure financing, Tokyo's offer was clean, comprehensive, and compelling. It included the export of Japan's E5 Shinkansen technology, a globally admired system known for its safety, punctuality, and advanced engineering. Japan proposed a $14 billion build plan for the corridor and backed it up with a massive $33.5 billion loan from the Japan International Cooperation Agency at an eye-watering low interest rate of just 0.1% over 50 years. Moreover, the deal came with promises of full technology transfer, hands-on training for Indian engineers, and strict adherence to Japan's high safety standards. For India, it was not just a deal, it was a diplomatic and developmental milestone. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed it as a defining moment. The media called it transformative. The public saw it as a national breakthrough. The groundbreaking took place in 2017, with a projected completion date of 2022. However, as the excitement faded and the cameras left, the real India took over. And so did its oldest challenge: land. Land acquisition has historically been the Achilles heel of Indian infrastructure projects, and this one was no exception. Despite Japanese engineers working meticulously on designs, viaducts, and construction schedules, local governments in Gujarat and Maharashtra struggled to obtain farmland and residential areas from thousands of individuals. Resistance came swiftly. Many farmers refused to give up their land, some demanding more compensation, others simply not trusting the system. Protests flared, court cases multiplied, and approvals got entangled in red tape. By 2020, less than 30% of the necessary land had been acquired. The bullet train project, meant to be India's high-tech marvel, was literally stuck in the mud. In some places, locals staged fierce protests, arguing that the project served only the elite, while their own livelihoods were being threatened. Japan's Shinkansen team, although diplomatic and patient, began to express concern about India's ability to fulfill its side of the bargain. Construction couldn't begin without land, and time was running out. By 2022, instead of a futuristic train zipping across the Western Plains, India had only managed to build about 10 kilometers of incomplete track. The 2022 deadline came and went, not with an announcement, but with silence. Officials stopped giving updates. Politicians redirected questions. The world, however, didn't stop watching. International analysts began to mock the project, calling it the slowest bullet train in the world, and a warning for how not to handle infrastructure modernization. By early 2024, the numbers painted a grim picture. After nearly a decade, the project was only 25.6% complete. Japan, once proud to showcase its Shinkansen model in India, was now quietly frustrated. Behind closed doors, Japanese officials began to float the idea that India might want to consider other partners. It was a diplomatic way of saying that we might pull out. With the stakes so high and political pressure mounting at home, the Modi government was forced into a corner. It could admit failure and risk national embarrassment, or try to breathe new life into a failing dream. As the Mumbai-Ahmedabad project declined, New Delhi knew it needed a fast reset. Toward the end of 2024, with the public growing restless and Japan growing cold, the Indian government announced a stunning decision. It would reopen the entire project for international bidding. To make the deal more attractive, India massively increased the scope, from the original $14 billion to an eye-watering $100 billion. The message was clear. India was willing to pour in cash and open the door to global railway giants if they could make this vision a reality. But there was a catch. India wasn't just offering money. It came with a long list of demands that many found difficult, if not impossible, to accept. The tender was floated to all the major players in high-speed rail: Germany, France, South Korea, Spain, and of course, China. But the invitation to Beijing carried extra weight. It was diplomatically bold, considering the soured relations following the deadly Galwan Valley clash in 2020. Still, there was history to lean on. Back in 2013, India and China had signed a memorandum of understanding to explore cooperation on high-speed rail. China, seeking to showcase its rail empire, had expressed deep interest in the Indian market. It had conducted feasibility studies, offered to share technology, and hoped to expand its influence through infrastructure diplomacy. So when India extended the invitation in late 2024, it wasn't just a business move. It was a symbolic gesture. Officials privately admitted that if China accepted, the deal was essentially theirs. With successful railway projects across Southeast Asia, particularly the Jakarta-Bandung HSR in Indonesia, China had proven its ability to deliver under tough conditions. In fact, some believe China could finish the Mumbai-Ahmedabad line in less than 5 years if given the contract. But what followed shocked almost everyone. China not only declined, it did so swiftly, firmly, and publicly. There was no back-channel negotiation and no diplomatic discussion, just a clear and resounding no. For Indian policymakers, the rejection was more than a lost deal. It was a wake-up call. But why would China walk away from a $100 billion contract? Because India's terms, as laid out, were nothing short of overwhelming. First, India wanted the contractor country to provide 80% of the funding through government-backed loans, effectively asking Beijing to bankroll a project it wouldn't fully control. Second, India mandated that 50% of the trains and components be manufactured domestically, in line with the Make in India initiative, a demand that would severely disrupt China's tightly integrated supply chains. Third, India insisted that the contractor also fund and build a manufacturing facility in India, with an estimated cost of over $2.1 billion. And as a further condition, India reserved the right to withhold full payment for train sets unless the factory was built. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. On top of this, India wanted the loans to be either interest-free or at rock-bottom rates, conditions that even Japan, its most trusted development partner, was struggling to defend in its own parliament. However, the final red flag for Beijing was India's tax policy. Specifically, the retrospective taxation law allowed the Indian government to impose taxes on past business activities at will. This created legal and financial unpredictability that no foreign investor could ignore. For Chinese officials, it wasn't a contract, it was a geopolitical and economic minefield. To them, the risk wasn't worth the reward. Even if China agreed, it would be funding a project under unclear laws, building factories with little legal protection, relying on unpredictable land policies, and operating in a country where anti-China sentiment was growing steadily. In Beijing's eyes, this was a lose-lose scenario. But there was something else beneath the surface, a strategic message. By walking away, China was signaling a shift in its posture. Back in 2013, it was eager to prove its capabilities. But in 2024, it no longer needed validation from India. The CR-450, China's newest high-speed rail marvel, had already hit test speeds of 450 kilometers per hour, the fastest train in the world. China had signed deals with Laos, Indonesia, and Thailand, and was in talks with Middle Eastern and Eastern European countries. India was no longer central to China's rail diplomacy. By rejecting the offer, China was saying, "We don't chase, we lead." And they weren't the only ones to step back. France, Germany, and South Korea quietly declined as well. The international message was unambiguous that India's expectations were too high, the risk too great, and the safeguards too few. The only country left standing at the bidding table was Japan again. But this time, Japan wasn't offering the old solution. It was about to pitch something entirely new, a futuristic train that didn't even exist yet, E10. India wanted it by 2027. And not just conceptual support. It wanted actual operational units, tailor-made to survive India's scorching heat, thick dust, heavy usage, and a completely different power system. Essentially, India wanted a train that didn't exist, made to perform in conditions it had never been designed for, and delivered 3 years before its parent country planned to use it. To say this was ambitious would be a severe understatement. At the time of India's request, the E10 Shinkansen existed primarily as a concept, a sleek PowerPoint presentation on JR East's development roadmap. Some components were being tested, but no full train had been assembled, let alone test run. Engineers were still simulating performance in Japanese terrain, not preparing for live operation in South Asia. The design of the E10 certainly promised innovation. It was expected to have faster braking, new earthquake-resistant shock absorbers, enhanced cargo loading features, and even derailment prevention systems suited for Japan's seismic zones. However, none of these features had been validated in real-world conditions. More importantly, the entire model had been envisioned for Japan's Tohoku Shinkansen line, not for India's extreme summer heat, unpredictable power fluctuations, or dusty rail corridors. Yet India didn't just want to import these future-forward trains. It wanted to go a step further, to manufacture 50% of the trains domestically under the Make in India campaign. This meant that Hitachi and Kawasaki Heavy Industries, Japan's industrial titans, would have to finalize the prototype, adapt it to Indian environmental and technical standards, manufacture it in India, and deliver it for rollout in just over 2 years, all while testing was still underway in Japan. On top of that, India's power infrastructure had its own quirks. Even the pilot rail section built for testing had poles tilted by 15%, raising serious concerns about alignment, compatibility, and operational safety. The technical challenge was immense. Even Japanese engineers were shocked at the speed and scale of India's expectations. They were still refining the base model for Japanese use, and now they were being asked to build a custom version for an untested environment, deliver it early, and ensure that half of it was built in a country that had never manufactured anything at this scale before. The request was as daring as it was daunting. Observers began asking the obvious question: why would India take such a reckless gamble? Why bet on a prototype instead of sticking to a tested train or waiting until the E10 was ready? The answer, many argue, lies in politics, not engineering. For the Modi government, the Mumbai-Ahmedabad bullet train was never just a piece of infrastructure. It was a flagship national project, the kind that could be broadcast on campaign posters, celebrated in speeches, and used as a symbol of India's technological ascent. But by 2024, the reality on the ground was grim. Delays had piled up, construction was crawling, public criticism was rising, and Japan was losing interest. What was once a promise of pride was becoming an emblem of failure. Faced with this crisis, the government needed a lifeline and found one in futurism. By pivoting to the E10, India was shifting the public conversation from "why isn't it done yet?" to "imagine what's coming next." It wasn't about fixing the past, it was about distracting from it. The E10 was a blank slate. It hadn't failed because it hadn't been tested. It hadn't been delayed because it didn't exist. It was a future full of possibility, and in politics that's often more powerful than the present. But this strategy is riddled with risk. The E10 has not been tested in high-temperature climates like India's. It hasn't been adapted to India's power grid, which is different from Japan's. It was engineered for Japan's seismic soil patterns, not for India's complex and varied geography. And most critically, it is not mass-producible yet, certainly not by 2027, especially with a 50% local manufacturing requirement. If Japan and India somehow manage to make this miracle happen, it will be a marvel, a global first in high-speed rail innovation. But if they fail, India's bullet train dream may suffer its final derailment before it ever leaves the station. However, while India was making futuristic bets on an untested train, China was already operating at full speed. In 2023, China's CR-450 EMU successfully completed a test run at a mind-bending 450 kilometers per hour, officially becoming the fastest commercial train on Earth. And unlike the E10, the CR-450 wasn't a concept. It was a nearly complete machine, developed using real-world data, operational feedback, and robust national infrastructure. China wasn't just testing the CR-450 in controlled lab environments. It was running the train through its entire climate spectrum, from icy plateaus to scorching plains, proving that it could handle not just speed, but endurance and versatility. And while the train was being engineered at breakneck pace, China also maintained full control over the entire industrial chain, from design to manufacturing to rail deployment. That meant no dependency on foreign companies, no outsourcing delays, and no fractured accountability. Moreover, China had already demonstrated its project delivery model across Southeast Asia. The Jakarta-Bandung high-speed rail, which went from idea to reality in just 5 years, became a symbol of what Chinese engineering could achieve when unburdened by land delays and political roadblocks. And the Chinese model didn't stop at just trains. It bundled together technology transfer, local worker training, engineering logistics, and flexible financing, creating a one-stop solution that appealed to many developing nations. Had India chosen to work with China initially before going to Japan, many experts believe the Mumbai-Ahmedabad corridor could have already been operational. India made the mistake of choosing Japan and limiting China for its train infrastructure development. And now, for China, the Indian market is irrelevant. Do you think India made the right decision by rejecting China and betting on Japan's untested E10 trains? Or should it have chosen the faster, proven path with China's CR450? In the comment section right below, share our thoughts on whether India can trust China for any future collaborations, given its biggest American rival, and India is an American ally and can be punished. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.